this group, which is really in the wedge between the two populations. Here is the West Bank. And here is the plan for Beersheba region, which is a very beautifully drawn plan. It was approved 2004, I think, inner ring, middle ring, and outer ring. Some of these towns are Arabs, some of them are Jews, and it looks like a good metropolis. But on the left is aerial photograph of the same area, okay? And you see those dozens of unrecognized villages and towns around Beersheba, which are all of Palestinians that are either sitting on the ancestors' land, and this here is the indigenous factor, or they were bought by Israel from other regions. And actually Israel told this tribe, you settle here, and then 40 or 50 years later said to them again, you're illegal. And Israel, in its plans, has an effort to urbanize the Bedouins, of course, and this is to do with the land regime. This is because the land in the Negev has been declared dead land, because the Bedouin had a traditional system that was semi-nomadic, and they never actually registered it with the Ottomans or the British. So the state took the sort of dead land approach and projected it to the past. They said to the Bedouins, the Ottomans didn't tell you and the British didn't tell you, but we tell you that 100 years ago you were trespassers, and now we're going to punish you. And this is a situation in the court, really. It's like Kafkaesque situation. And I represent some of them in the court, and by the letter of the law, the judge is right. There's not much that the judge can do. But of course, in terms of legislation and transformation, Israel can easily legislate that if you have conclusive evidence that the land was yours, the neighbors, some papers, aerial photographs, then we allocate it to you. But Israel rejects all these kind of approaches and nationalizes all the land that wasn't registered properly with the British or the Ottomans. And also the last date to do that was 1921. If people are interested in the legal details, I can tell you. So we have quite a desperate situation. These are the planned towns that are not bad, actually. The government is trying to induce the Bedouins to give up their land. And by the way, the Bedouin land is recognized only in one instant, when they give it up. Because if they get a house in the planned towns, they sign away, they sign off all the land claims. So the state does recognize it when they give it away. This is, again, a Kafkaesque situation. And the towns haven't really taken off, except the population that is landless. The people that have claims to the land have remained on the land. And this is the situation around Beersheba, which resembles a lot of third world cities in terms of the shanty towns and the illegal, supposedly illegal, unrecognized towns and villages that don't get any services from the state, not roads, not power, not any water, and this is what the landscape looks like around Beersheba. This is hanging on to the land, hoping to try and be recognized. I worked and prepared an alternative plan for these villages, for which I had a little bit of a clip, but maybe now we'll see if we have time during the questions and answers that elaborate on one demonstration we did recently with these people, and the plan that we prepared for recognition, if you like, moving these people from gray space to the light, to the legal space and inclusion that they so desperately seek. This is a scene somewhere, you know, the sort of the edge of the neighborhood of Beersheba and some of the Bedouins. And it wouldn't be unfamiliar for you, people that travel Asia and South America and Africa, but people are surprised about it in Israel, but it's very much a reality. It comes with a very hard axe, with a violent edge, increasing house demolitions. In 2011, we had more than 1,000, about 1,050 houses demolished in the Negev. There were 700 more demolished in the West Bank. This was the first year that there were more house demolition in the Negev than in the West Bank. So when you think about citizenship and sovereignty, the areas are blurred. And of course, it doesn't resolve anything, because these people will rebuild on the spot. They have nowhere to go. And they sit on their land. And plus, around Beersheba itself, there are about 60,000 houses that are considered illegal by the Israeli state. So if you demolish 1,000, it doesn't even make a dent, especially when they are rebuilt immediately. So, and at the same time, again, I'm going to the importance of the land regime. Israel is planning new Jewish settlements in the Negev, and these are the yellow new settlements, and some of them would replace Arab settlements that exist in this land that are supposed to be urbanized into the towns. So I call this internal colonization. And we'll skip now, or we already talked about that this kind of legal spatial system has created stratified citizenship that is institutionalized on the long term with different types of rights and capabilities. We didn't talk about labor migrants, but it's another factor, maybe for another lecture, but there are hundreds of thousands of them in Israel. Let's hear from another prime minister, the previous prime minister, Ehud Olmert, and he said the creation of a Palestinian state is a vital Israeli interest. Failure to reach a peace agreement and create a viable Palestinian state would plunge Israel into a South African-style apartheid struggle. We are very close to such a moment. So this is not a critical scholar saying to you, this is the Prime Minister of Israel is saying that, of course, when he lost power. When he was in power, things were, settlement continued, the army continued, attacked Gaza and Lebanon, etc. But the truth comes from his mouth. And 4 years later, there's not much that is done to prevent this kind of... So in the last 5 minutes, I'll tell you about what we developed in the last year. There's a group of Israeli and Palestinians. I've written on it already about a decade ago, but things take a while, is the issue of Confederation. Again, this it's very confusing. There are, if you like, 6 scenarios on the table in terms of how to resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict, including inside, outside the Green Line, Palestine, Israel. It's very complex, of course. There is the Greater Israel agenda, which is strengthened greatly in the last few years. And this, as I said, the colonialism clause under Jewish sovereignty, Jewish homeland, and a very convincing discourse of Jewish security. That's strong, although it will lead to an official apartheid situation if it's accepted. Then, of course, there's also, we didn't talk enough about it, but it's very important, there's a Greater Palestine discourse, especially by the Islamic groups. And they in themselves developed in the last 20 years a very strong discourse, so powerful that actually won the Palestinian elections. Not that they think they can implement it, but as a flag to go beyond the two-state solution, to reject it, and to come back to the traditional position that all Palestine should be Arab. That is a very powerful scenario on the table. These two groups probably know they'll never implement it, but the strength that they mobilize is very impressive. There is a scenario that is emerging in the last 7-8 years, mainly by intellectuals, but it's gaining strength. It's one democracy, not Greater Israel, not Greater Palestine, but one democracy, binational state, a secular state, a civil state. I have, as you'll see, some problem with that, although as an ideal, it's very promising. But as a political agenda and program is more problematic. And then there is the two-state solution that is probably, in most likelihood, will be 2 ethnic states. And the repressive consolidation that we talked about, it's, the very continuing the stalemate which we've seen in the last 15 years, which is very much the agenda of this government, which is the center-right, it's not the extreme right. And then the last scenario that group of Israeli Palestinians that we felt was possible way for the future to square the circle, if you like, is gradual binationalism through confederation. And this is really a different outlook that they say it will not be 2 states the way they are. Why? Because it appears that even if we somehow grudgingly make Israel open up the space for a Palestinian state, it will have such severe constraints on its sovereignty in terms of border crossing, in terms of currency, in terms of security, in terms of all elements of sovereignty. Even the movement between Gaza and West Bank probably will be controlled. That probably this kind of skewed two-state solution will be more of a cause for protracted conflict than peace. And what we see from Gaza in the last 2 or 3 years, that should be condemned by all peace-oriented people, which is terror against the Israelis, of course answered by more and more violence by Israel, but nonetheless it gives us scenarios what happened when two hostile entities are one next to the other without proper resolution and reconciliation. On the other hand, the one-state solution, which theoretically for democratic and liberal people or socialist people could actually offer a post-nationalist and post-colonial definitely scenario, hits an unbridgeable obstacle, and that's the existence of the State of Israel as a legitimate entity. And this is why you have almost zero support among Israelis, because a one-state solution will dissolve the State of Israel, will create something else out of it. And there is really no precedent in the post-1945, the UN era, that a state actually unites with another people. There are three unions that actually occurred: East and West Germany, North and South Vietnam, and North and South Yemen. But there were people with the same culture and the same ethnicity, and there is no other precedent of two, especially warring and conflicting groups coming and actually building a state together. The opposite is the true. There were, at this period, between 1945 and today, 38 splits of state, and we are sitting in one of those, right? So the trend is much more for self-determination to have the sovereign space rather than have one state. And the continuous surveys in Israel show that the one-state solution is gaining a little bit among the Jews, but it's still around 5 to 7%. And in that respect, you cannot expect most Jews to mobilize what you need, major mobilization, for a campaign that will, in their eye, do away with the state, which is such a source of security, maybe false security, but nonetheless very much a self-perception of a secure place in the world for a very traumatized nation. So in that respect, we Israelis and Palestinians, a group of about 20, met a few times, and we thought about a possible progress, which will be that in order to go from point A to point B, you also need to see point C, to get out of the insecurities of both peoples, because both Jews and the Palestinians, and especially the Palestinians in the last 6 years, have a great reason to feel insecure from any political agreement with Israel, that you would not do away with the idea of sovereign Palestine, sovereign Israel, but cook it, if you like, construct it a bit differently. First of all, Jerusalem could be a joint capital and an autonomous region, which will benefit both Jews and Palestinians. And of course, it's a quintessential global city, and it has to be stable, calm, and inviting. And then there will be another layer of a joint council that will manage joint interests. And if we see the positive examples of confederations happening, like in Switzerland, like in Canada, like the European Union even, it starts with a very mundane joint management. It could be of air pollution, could be of labor movement, could be like it was in Europe, of import of steel and coal. That's how it started between Germany and France. So manage the